Welcome to Block 12 of our Celebrating the States Block of the Month. This is the Illinois block. For this block, you will need dark, light, and medium fabrics. From the dark fabric, cut 2 squares that measure 5 inches by 5 inches. You also need 2 squares that are 3 1/4 inches by 3 1/4 inches. These squares will be bisected corner to corner to make 4 triangles. And lastly, from the dark, you need 16 squares that measure 2 1/2 inches by 2 1/2 inches. From the light fabric, you need 2 squares that are 5 inches by 5 inches. You also need to cut 1 square that is 3 1/4 inches by 3 1/4 inches from the light fabric. From the medium fabric, you need to cut 8 rectangles that are 2 1/2 inches by 4 1/2 inches. I wanted to use a stripe for the flying geese in this block, so I had to be a little careful how I cut this to make sure I had the stripes going the correct way. Now that we have all our pieces cut, it's time to sew them together. Make sure you're using 1/4 inch seam allowances. We're going to construct this block in 3 phases. The first step is making the center part of the block. Piece 2 of the dark triangles onto opposite sides of the 3 1/4 inch square. It doesn't have to be perfectly centered. This will be trimmed later on. Just make sure it's about as evenly centered as you can make it. Once the first 2 sides are sewn on, you can either run over to the ironing board and press it there, and you're going to press towards the triangles, or you can just finger press it right where you're at. Piece the 2 remaining dark triangles to opposite sides of this unit, and then trim off the little triangles that hang off over the edge on the sides. Now it's time to press towards the triangles, and then once pressed, you can square this block up to measure 4 1/2 inches by 4 1/2 inches. The tips of the inner square should be about on the 2 1/4 inch markings on the ruler. Now that the center part is done, it is time to work on the 4 corners of the block. You're going to start with the 5-inch squares of both the dark and the light. You're going to put them right sides together, and then you're going to either use your diagonal seam tape or draw a line corner to corner so that you have a line to follow, and you're going to sew a 1/4 inch away from that line on both sides of the line. If you're enjoying our Celebrating the States series, we hope you'll remember to hit that like button. Once you've got the lines sewn on both sides of the line, you're going to cut right on the line to get 4 half square triangles, and then it's time to press. Press towards the dark fabric, and I usually like to press it flat first to kind of set the seam, and then press it towards the dark. Once they're pressed, use a block lock ruler or a similar kind of ruler where you have a 45-degree line to follow that center line down the middle, and then trim these blocks to 4 1/2 inches by 4 1/2 inches. Okay, our corners are done, and now it's time to make the flying geese. Place a 2.5-inch square of the dark fabric on one end of the rectangles that measure 2.5 inches by 4.5 inches. Line up the edges on the end, and then you're going to sew from the corner in the middle to the outer corner. I'm using my diagonal seam tape to help me sew from corner to corner, but if you need to, you can draw a line from the corner to corner so you can sew right on the line. At this point, you can either trim the seam down to 1/4 inches and just throw away those extra triangles, or I like to sew a seam that is a 1/2 inch away from the first line, and then I can cut in between the lines to get my 1/4 inch seam allowance, and then I have 8 extra half square triangle units that I can use in another project. I like to use this method because I don't like to waste perfectly good fabric, and it doesn't add that much time to the sewing of the block. Press towards the dark, towards the corner. Now we're going to do the other side of the flying geese the same way we did the first side. So use your remaining 8 dark squares and finish the geese. If this is the first state block you've seen in our Celebrating the States series, check the description below for a link to the playlist for the other states that we've done. Once you have them cut apart, it's time to press. You're going to press towards the dark fabric, pressing toward the corner. I will usually try to make sure that I press the little leftover half square triangle units that I've made during the block as I'm going through the block. That way I don't tuck them away and then have to do it sometime in the future. They're already pressed and ready to trim. Now it's time to make squares that'll measure 4.5 inches by 4.5 inches out of the flying geese units. You're going to sew 2 together, make sure they both point in the same direction, and I sew the top one with the point on top so that I can see it and not sew through it so that I don't cut off that point. I always check these to make sure I didn't cut the point off and I can see the nice sharp point in there. And then once you've checked them all, it's time to press. Now it's time to combine all the units to make the block. You're going to make 2 of the top row and 1 of the middle row. I'm always double checking as I'm working on these blocks to make sure I haven't flipped something the wrong way and I have my geese going the directions they need to go. Once you have your rows sewn together, it's time to press. For the center row, you are going to press towards the center block. For the 2 outer rows, you are going to press toward the corner block. Just 2 seams left and your Illinois block is done. I like to use a few pins to help me sew the rows together so that the seams don't adjust and move as I'm trying to sew over them. We invite you to hit the like button, share this video with your quilting friends, leave us a comment, and make sure to subscribe so you can see all the future Celebrating the States videos. Once you're done sewing, press away from the center row. This block should measure 12.5 inches by 12.5 inches and will finish 12 inches by 12 inches in the quilt. Thanks for watching and happy quilting!